Hey, good evening, everybody. Along with my fellow commissioners, I'd like to welcome you to the San Mateo County Harbor District meeting. Today's date is August the 20th, 2014. I'd like to begin the meeting by having roll call.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Here.
Commissioner Brennan?
Here.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Here.
Commissioner Tucker?
Here.
President Caravano?
Here. Thank you. At this time, we have an opportunity for the members of the public to address the commission on any items that are not on the agenda. And I have 3 speaker slips for this public comment. The first one is Mr. Ed Larienes.
I think can I have her go first, Mary Lorenas?
I called you, sir, so please come forward.
Okay.
And as a policy of the Harbor District, that you have 3 minutes for public comment.
Okay, that will work. So my name's Edmundo Lorenas. I'm local live in Moss Beach. I'm the chair of the Surfrider chapter of San Mateo County. I'm also on the board of directors of Committee for Green Foothills. And my employment, those are all things I do on the side. My employment is with DuPont Industrial Biosciences. I'm a scientist there. I've worked on biofuels for over 25 years. So by way of credibility, I think I need to tell you just a little bit about my experience. My wife and I sailed a 30-foot sailboat to the Pacific, around the Pacific. In college, I worked in commercial fishing, worked my way through school. I've been through ports all over the world. And then I'll tell you just one experience I've had, which will highlight why we're concerned about this. When Mary and I took our boat up the coast, we stopped in Santa Barbara for fuel. The guy at the fuel dock said, "I'm required by law to tell you that it's a federal offense to drop 1 drop of oil in the water. And I'm required to report it. But I will help you fuel the boat so that that doesn't happen." So they helped us. They gave us a little donut for the spigot. They gave us absorbent pads. They put a little catchment for the overflow, and they watched us. That's my experience in Santa Barbara, and the water is completely clear. It's a port where lots of fishermen and lots of recreational boaters go all the time. So I'm not here to demonize the Harbor District or the harbor or whoever runs the fuel dock. What I would like to see is for the fuel management at Pillar Point Harbor to be held to the highest standards and for it to comply with federal law, and it's not at this point. I think Mary sent you some photographs. There's some before and after photographs. You should have a look at them because they clearly show what happened before we brought this to light. We've complained about this many times, and we escalated it to this point because we feel it's time to actually get something done. We have a boat in the harbor right now. Almost every time we go there, there's a sheen of oil on the surface of the harbor, and it's just outrageous. We have Pillar Point Harbor is next to a marine protected area, so the water that goes in and out of the harbor has the potential for impacting the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve. And I think the tourists that go there don't appreciate it. If you look at, if you're a tourist walking along the harbor and you see sheens of oil, what does that tell them about how we respect our environment? We can't ask them to respect it if we don't. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lorenas. Next is Mary Lorenas. And again, public comment testimony is limited to 3 minutes, and the deputy clerk will let you know when the 30 seconds is left.
Okay, I'm Mary Lorenas, and I'm going to speak really loud because I understand folks in the back can't hear, may not hear somebody speaking up here. I'm going to read a letter in regards to what my concerns are, and I do have photographs to back them up. Commissioners, President Pavarano, Tucker, Holsinger, Brennan, Bernardo, and Harbor Master Grindy. I would like to discuss my concerns with the operation of the Pillar Point fuel dock. I was fortunate to meet with Harbor Master Grindy and Lauren Dockendorf of the Dock Walkers program on August 14th in Mr. Grindy's office in Pillar Point, Thank you, Scott, for meeting with us. During that meeting, I was very impressed by Mr. Grindy's knowledge and the direction he would like to take the harbor in the future. One concern that I brought up was the ongoing diesel in the Pillar Point Harbor. In the past, I've reported on several occasions visible oily sheens along the docks. On one occasion, the diesel fumes from the fuel in the water was so strong you could feel it on your eyes. I reported this to the harbor master's office. I don't know what became of it. On Sunday, August 17, 2014, my husband and I were paddleboarding in the harbor, and we stopped at the fuel dock to take a break because my feet were killing me. We were walking around and we noticed a container of liquid detergent on top of part of one of the fuel pump networks on the fuel dock. We then noticed, and therefore photographed, multiple poor practices and violations regarding maintaining the fuel dock area and preventing fuel from getting into the water. Please note that the doors on both pump stations were open and unlocked, so it was easy to take a picture of the interiors. Again, I have photographs to back up my information. First, a container of liquid detergent was on, as I had mentioned, it's illegal to use or allow detergents into the water. The nozzle on the fuel pump was in its bracket, however, present on the dock below the nozzle tip was a black, sticky, wet pool of diesel fuel. About a teaspoon of liquid was present. There was no catchment under this nozzle tip. I touched the pool with my finger, and yes, it smelled, and I verified it was diesel. Inside this pump station, there was several used, soggy, soiled absorbent pads and rags uncontained and tossed on the floor of the unit. The door, as I mentioned, was open. Inside the next pump station was more trash in an open plastic container filled half full with red-dyed marine diesel. This open container was not under the nozzle. Again, the door was open. An oily sheen was present on the water next to the fuel dock, and best photographed in the photographs number 1. Warning sign that prohibits the spilling of water and diesel in the water was faded, illegible, and cracked. On August 18th, I returned to the fuel dock and noted several changes taking place. The bottle of liquid detergent was gone. If you don't want to hear this, I can have it placed in the Half Moon Bay Review. Can I continue or not?
We allow 3 minutes for public testimony.
Okay, I'm going to send this and all my photographs to the Half Moon Bay Review, San Francisco Times, San Jose Chronicle, anybody I can get to pay.
Okay, next on the agenda for public comment is Mr. Keaton Erhan. Mr. Erhan, and again, we have 3 minutes for public comment, and the deputy clerk will let you know in 30 seconds remains on your time.
My name is Keaton Erhan. I've been, it's 210 San Mateo Road, Half Moon Bay. I'm a resident of Half Moon Bay for a long time. And we operate that fuel dock for over 25 years. And we always try to maintain everything with that environmental health, San Mateo County, as well as everybody that we know of, every agency. We have pressurized lines checked every so often, as the law requires, plus more than that. And there's accusations been made, and that's why I'm over here to address some of them. And my feeling is that if this is the case in any manner, I would like to go ahead with board's permission, shut down the fuel dock tomorrow, effective tomorrow morning, and or harbor staff or harbor commissioner want to meet with us there. I have Mr. Predas, who's been running the fuel dock over 20 years. He's here, and we walked the fuel dock. There was no sheen. The rags Mary was talking about is those are the absorbent pads, and they're normal. We go beyond that, what we have to do. And then containment is, when we change a nozzle from a bigger nozzle to smaller nozzle, there's a certain amount of the fuel that comes in and drips into a little containment, and we clean every day that. And so there's no place. We have line leaks. We have all the lines of pressure checked. This year's testing has been done, and we passed it on. So I really don't know what else we can do, but I'm happy to close the fuel dock tomorrow until everybody's satisfied. And I would like a sense of direction from the staff which way to go from here. And so I don't want to cause any environmental problems to anybody. My job is to run the fuel dock in a good manner, and I have the folks who are trained and good people. And with that said, I'd like to know what my next step is, and maybe one of the board members can tell me what to do here, or maybe you can have your own meeting. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nuran. Okay, that concludes public comment. Let me make sure that, yeah, that concludes public comment. Next we have staff recognition.
Nothing from manager at this time.
Not today, but I'll be bringing it back next week, or next
Okay.
meeting.
No, okay. Okay, first item is the consent calendar. Item number 1, minutes of meeting from the August 6, 2014.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes
I'd like to take
for
it off
August 6th of
consent.
2014.
I'd like to pull it off consent, please.
We have a motion. Could we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Bernardo?
I'm sorry, just for clarification, this on the motion, aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
I'm sorry, anybody can pull anything off consent. Did we pull it off consent? I'm confused about what.
We had a motion and a second.
I pulled it off consent. Anybody can pull anything off consent, even a member of the
Okay.
public.
So item number 1 will be moved to new business then. And we'll consider it at new business. Okay.
I believe, does the motion stand and then we just have discussion on it?
I pulled it off
We can
consent.
check with council.
Yeah.
Just a point of order. It would be my understanding that the motion made and seconded was for approval of the minutes, that it's taken off of consent calendar simply means it's eligible for discussion at this point.
There is only one item on the consent calendar. Under these circumstances, it would seem to be, form over substance, whether to renew the motion and then have discussion or leave the motion as is and discussion one way or another. You may, having removed it from consent calendar, discuss this item. I have no objection to the motion standing.
Thank you.
So just point of order, clarification for the public. You can't discuss an item if it's on the consent calendar. So the reason I asked to have it pulled off consent was so that there could be a discussion.
Okay, let's take that up right now. Let's talk about the minutes of August 6, 2014.
So I'd just like to comment that I'm going to be voting no on the minutes, specifically because there is no information included in the minutes as to how members of the public, how their public comment came in. It doesn't say whether or not they were in favor or in support or not in support of a particular agenda item. And our minutes, our action minutes have essentially become an agenda. So for those reasons, I am going to vote no. Thank you.
Call the question.
Do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
No.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
President Caravano?
Aye. The motion carries. Item number 2, the bills and claims.
Mr. President, I've reviewed the bill and
Just to say, we have a public comment card for this. I'd like to hear Mr. John Olam. Please come forward. And again, we have 3 minutes for public comment on this.
Won't take that long. Computer's picked a bad time to do an update, so I don't have it right in front of me. But in the bills and claims, I noticed that there's like a near $15,000 charge for reimbursing for Mr. Grinnell's legal expenses. And I'm just wondering what the heck that is. I mean, that seems extensive, incredible, that it would be that kind of a charge. We'll be filing a PRA request for the actual documentation that backs that up and how that all came about. But I was hoping you could save Ms. Harris some time and just address that at some point while discussing the money you're spending on our behalf this evening. Thank you.
Okay, that's all the comments we had, public comments for item number 2. Now I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I've reviewed the bills and claims and find them to be in order for payment in the amount stated in the agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further comments or questions?
I have a couple comments and questions.
Please.
So regarding the bill, it lists the vendor as Peter Grinnell, it lists the description as legal expense reimbursement, and it lists the amount as $14,856.25. So in regard to that, I had a phone conversation with our outside counsel, Liebert Cassidy Whitmore, yesterday, and I learned that Mr. Grinnell is seeking board approval for legal expense reimbursement for invoices for his personal attorney, Mark C. Watson, in the amount of $14,856.25. And for that reason, I plan to recuse myself on this vote. And then additionally, I had a question about project management. At the very bottom of our list of bills, there is a charge for $4,349.14, and I believe that we've previously paid this individual as well. And I was wondering if we could get some clarification from the staff as to what specifically this project management was for.
That's a project manager that we hired, I believe it was November, that was approved by the board.
For what project are they managing?
They're managing all types of projects for the harbor master, and that was approved in November. I can send you all of the approving documents if you'd like me to.
Are they still working as a consultant? Did they work on the Tiger Grant application?
I believe so, yes, it's a project.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for explaining that.
Okay, we have roll call, please.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
No.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
President Caravano?
Aye. The motion carries. Okay, item...
Point of
please.
order. I want to change my vote from no to recusal.
Item number 3 is a response to the civil grand jury report issued on July the 9th, 2014. Here is, in order to make this an orderly and open agenda item, I would like to propose the following. During this agenda item, we are going to consider, discuss, and approve a response to the grand jury report that was issued on July the 9th, 2014. In this report, the civil grand jury report, there are 12 findings and 11 recommendations. And we all know that this is a very difficult issue. And we need to give this very extremely careful consideration. During this agenda item, I have 6 goals that I would like to accomplish, along with my fellow commissioners. The first one is that the commissioners all have an opportunity to provide input and be heard. The second is that the public has a clear understanding of the process. Third, that the public has an opportunity to comment and provide input. Fourth, that we recognize the hard work that staff has put into this document, review and gathering all the information. 5, that we have an orderly process. And 6, that at the end of the process, we comply with all the legal requirements as we approve a response to the civil grand jury. It is important that we set some clear ground rules for consideration of this agenda item and stick to these ground rules. These ground rules apply to both the public and all to the commissioners. Here's what I propose the process to be like.
Excuse me, could you tell us the 6 again? Because I couldn't catch all that. I want to write it down, so I don't have anything printed out. You didn't provide us with anything.
Number 1, the commissioners all have an opportunity to provide input and be heard. The public has a clear understanding of the process. The public has an opportunity to comment and provide input. We recognize, acknowledge the hard work the staff has put into this document. That we have an orderly process, and at the end of the process, we comply with the legal requirement that we approve a response to the civil grand jury. Now, in our meeting packet, we have the following documents that have been provided for us. There are 5 separate documents. 1 are the commissioners' comments. 2 are the commissioners' comments organized by finding and recommendation. The 3rd is a draft introductory statement. The 4th is our commissioners' comments and a draft staff synthesis. And 5 is the auditor's response. So I'd like to begin this agenda item by number 1, having the commissioners make opening statements. I will ask them to be brief, no longer than 5 minutes, as there will be multiple opportunities for commissioners to speak throughout the evening. I would request that these comments be as brief as possible. After our opening statements, I would ask the public to comment. The purpose of holding public comment in the process is to inform commissioners of the public's view, so the commissioners' discussion will be an informed one. Because of the importance of this issue and the length of the grand jury report, I intend to be flexible in enforcing the district's usual 3-minute rule, but I ask the public comment to be limited to 5 minutes each. I hope that my fellow commissioners will support this flexibility. Public comments will be heard on any aspect of the grand jury report and are not limited to any one finding or recommendation. Public comment will not be taken again as part of the commissioner's subsequent deliberations on specific findings, and recommendations will be made only in this portion of the proceeding. After public comment, we will begin the commissioner's discussion of the report and draft response. As I mentioned, the agenda packet includes 12 findings and 10 recommendations that the district must respond to. For each finding and recommendation, staff has included in our agenda packet the written comments submitted by each commissioner, and then a staff drafted response which attempts, where possible, to synthesize the commissioner's response. In addition, there are some areas in which staff has provided additional background information that will be helpful in our deliberations. Staff has also provided a suggested introductory section to the response that is also in our agenda packet. Our deliberations may be time-consuming. Our rules call for a 10 p.m. cutoff. At any time during our deliberations on this matter, a commissioner may make a motion to extend debate beyond the 10 p.m. cutoff, or as we have set for our board meetings. I am advised, in accordance with Robert's rules, such a motion must receive 2/3 vote in order to be effective. Otherwise, we need to stop at 10 p.m. Instead of extending debate, or in addition to extending debate, I will also, at an appropriate time, entertain a motion to adjourn and continue the meeting to another time. I intend to enforce the above process fairly by making sure the rules apply to everyone. So, Having said that and having described the process, I'd like to begin by Commissioners' opening statements, which I ask the Commissioners to keep them within 5 minutes and be as brief as possible. I'd like to start with my left, with Commissioner Holzinger.
Very good. Thank you, President Paravano. My comments were submitted in writing and are part of the packet of materials, but for the benefit of those that are attending through the televised proceedings, I'm going to read it and hope that it stays within the time constraints. The 2013-2014 San Mateo County Civil Grand Jury Report recommends dissolution of the San Mateo County Harbor District. The report is seriously inaccurate and incomplete in many respects, and as a result, its recommendation is flawed and not well supported. The most notable and egregious example is its comments and conclusions regarding the Harbor District's finances and fiscal condition. The San Mateo County Harbor District has over $40 million in assets, and as of July 1, 2014, over $15 million in cash and accounts on hand. The 2014-2015 budget adopted by the Harbor District Commission in June 2014 projected total revenue of $8.9 million and expenses of $10.1 million. The shortfall was based on conservatively estimated real estate or real property tax receipts of $5.1 million compared to $6.7 million received the previous fiscal year. The week after this budget was adopted, San Mateo County reported that over $8 billion in increased property tax revenues was expected in the new fiscal year for the county as a whole, of which the Harbor District receives a share, ensuring that the Harbor District's share would be greater, not less, than what was received the previous year. In addition, the adopted budget included over $1.6 million in depreciation expense. This entry is required for accounting purposes to identify the amortization or life expectancy of such things as vehicles, tools, buildings, etc. It is not directly associated with any expenditures. For example, when those same vehicles, tools, buildings, etc. are repaired, renovated, and replaced, the depreciation expense is not reduced or eliminated. Thus, expenses may sometimes be effectively shown 2 times on a budget, once for the actual budgeting of an expense and a second time as part of depreciation expense. If the projected share of real property tax revenues was simply kept the same for the current fiscal year as it was for the last and depreciation expense was removed, the 2014-2015 budget would have shown projected receipts of $10.7 million and projected expenses of $8.5 million, a projected surplus of $2.2 million. This does not count the additional over $2 million that we actually had at the close of the fiscal year. The civil grand jury should have known this. What makes the civil grand jury's report even more interesting is that the second of its 12 findings was that, quote, the Harbor District's financial reporting meets the Governmental Accounting Standards Board requirements, while at the same time failing to note that independent financial auditors have given the Harbor District a clean bill of health for many years. It is hard to understand why the civil grand jury would acknowledge that the Harbor District follows proper accounting procedures, but then ignore the information in the Harbor District's financial reports and the annual findings of independent auditors. Notwithstanding the Harbor District's sound financial condition, the civil grand jury concludes that the Harbor District has had operating losses for the last 5 fiscal years of approximately $18.3 million. The annual budgets adopted and the conclusions of the annual independent audit reviews lead to no such conclusion. This flaw in the civil grand jury's report is so fundamental and so substantial that it calls into question all of the other findings and recommendations of the civil grand jury that form the basis for its recommendation that the Harbor District be dissolved. There is a local area formation commission, local agency formation commission in each of the California's 58 counties. A local agency formation commission may initiate the consolidation or dissolution of a special district. This does not occur very frequently, with most such efforts based on a conclusion that a financial savings would result. To suggest that a special district should be dissolved because of political differences of opinion or dissension among members of the governing body is a novel idea. Following this line of reasoning, it might be suggested that every form of democratic governance should be abolished because there are differences of opinion and dissension. In 2006, the San Mateo County's LAFCO recommended dissolution of the San Mateo County Harbor District because it had quote-unquote zero sphere of influence, end quote, and because of the Harbor District's debt to the Department of Boating Waterways, then over $15 million. Today, the DBW, now Division of Boating and Waterways, debt is down to about $5.8 million, and the loan is on schedule for payoff 1 year ahead of the 2019 deadline. In addition, the Harbor District started the current fiscal year, July 1, 2014, with over $15 million in cash and investments. I would need additional time to conclude, and I would ask the full commission to allow me that.
How much time are you requesting?
Requesting 3 minutes.
Is that okay with the fellow commissioners?
I'm fine with it.
Okay, thank you.
So 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thus, at least one of the reasons for the 2006 LAFCO recommendation no longer exists. Whether the Harbor District still has a zero sphere of influence remains debatable. On the other hand, there are many good reasons not to dissolve the Harbor District. Perhaps the most important one is the historical purpose for the reestablishment of the Harbor District in 1945 to build and maintain a harbor of safe refuge on the San Mateo County coast. With the creation of the Pillar Point Harbor, the Harbor District also undertook to provide first responder search and rescue services on the San Mateo County coast. This is not a recreational function nor a revenue-generating activity. The well-trained staff of the Harbor District save an average of 110 lives per year. The county has limited, if any, experience in providing water-based first responder search and rescue services, working with the Coast Guard, Homeland Security, and other national and regional regulatory and law enforcement agencies to patrol, protect, and serve the needs of the county, region, state, and country in this way. While this is the first priority of the Harbor District, this function may not have the same critical and budgetary importance for the county, which serves a myriad of other needs and demands as part of a much larger and much broader responsibility. For example, during the most recent recession, the county found itself cutting back on many essential services, while during the same period of time, the San Mateo County Harbor District remained in sound financial condition and did not need to cut search and rescue or other services to the public. I'm going to skip the next paragraph and commend that to people to read so that I can finish in the 3 minutes. The bases for the civil grand jury's recommendations that the San Mateo County Harbor District be dissolved are flawed. The two principal reasons for this recommendation are that the Harbor District is not in a sound fiscal condition and that there is a political dissension on the governing board. The first reason is simply inaccurate, and the second is, frankly, un-American and anti-democratic. The report inadvertently praises the Harbor District by noting that it is unique among local special districts because of the multiple, complex, and varied functions it performs and services it provides. The report then goes on to tacitly acknowledge that not all of what the Harbor District does might be taken over by other agencies in the county. The civil grand jury report fails to consider whether spreading the services the Harbor District provides over multiple county or other public agencies is workable or in the public's interest. Doing so would create more complications, less responsiveness, and less service to the public. The civil grand jury report is also incomplete and defective by failing to consider the effect dissolution would have on the 49-year joint powers agreement now in place between the Harbor District and the City of South San Francisco for the management and operation of Oyster Point Marina, where the new ferry service now comes in. Indeed, the civil grand jury did not even send its report to South San Francisco or ask the city to respond to the report, as it did with the City of Half Moon Bay. This oversight is simply another flaw in the work of the civil grand jury. While reasonable minds might differ on whether the dissolution of the San Mateo County Harbor District is in order, whether now or at some time in the future, any discussion based on the 2013-2014 civil grand jury report would be misplaced and ill-advised. The civil grand jury's report on the San Mateo County Harbor District strongly suggests that it is the 2013-2014 San Mateo County Civil Grand Jury that needs to be investigated, not the Harbor District. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Olsen. I'm going to bounce over to my right, Commissioner Brennan.
So just a couple things to start. The rules that were discussed by the board president earlier are complex. I tried to write some notes, but I couldn't write them all down fast enough, and I would have really appreciated if we had gotten those printed out so that we could be looking at them right now. So going forward, if there's going to be lengthy rules, I think those should be provided to the board and to the public in print. Otherwise, it's just really hard to keep track of. I also wanted to point out that the revised draft of the district's response was provided today by the auditor at 2:35 p.m. That did not give me time to read it, and so unfortunately, I've only read the version that's included in the board packet before it was heavily edited with substantial changes. So at some point, I'd like to take a break before we get to that part and take a few minutes so that I can have a chance to read that heavily revised draft report. And I also feel that receiving that at 2:35 today was unacceptable. It just doesn't give members of the board or the public a chance to review the information. I also want to mention that there is an amended agenda number 2, or revision number 2, I guess. There's been 3 versions, I think. And that agenda was sent out to members of the board and the public less than 72 hours before the board meeting, which technically is a Brown Act violation. Although the changes may have been minor, I'm still not entirely sure what the changes are. And when we get amended agendas or amended board packet items, we really need to have redline and italicizing so that the board and the public knows what those changes are. Otherwise, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, and it makes it very difficult to read through and figure out, what the changes were. So I've mentioned before that I plan to write a minority report, and I am doing that. I'm not going to be presenting that tonight, but I do have a response to the findings and the recommendations of the civil grand jury. On F1, the Local Agency Formation Commission recommended dissolution of the Harbor District in 2006, with the county identified as a successor agency. The grand juries of 1990 and 1991 also recommended dissolution. My response to finding 1 was that while I agree that that is what those grand juries found, I believe that at this time, dissolution is not the best thing for San Mateo County. If the November 2014 election substantially changes the makeup of the board, a new reform board could change policies and fix the problems which the grand jury has identified. So I just wanted to make that point. On finding number 2, the district's financial reporting meets the governmental accounting standards. My comment is, I'm not an accounting expert and would like an audit of all financial processes to determine whether or not the district is meeting GASB reporting requirements, which are standard accounting requirements. On finding 3, it says commissioners are not receiving timely and adequately detailed financial reporting to support fully informed decisions. I agree with that finding. On finding number 4, it says committees, both standing and ad hoc, are not consistently formed, nor do they meet with any regularity. I agree with that finding. On finding 5, potential successor agencies exist which could reasonably assume all or some of the district's current responsibilities. I agree with that finding. On finding 6, the district consistently requires tax dollars to offset operating losses. I agree with the finding. On finding 7, operating losses for the last 5 fiscal years are approximately $18.3 million. I also agree with that finding and am concerned about the structural deficit that the Harbor District has been running for the last decade. On F8, finding 8, the district holds long-term assets that have not been revenue producing. I agree with the finding. On finding 9, at least 10 separate cities, towns, and special districts within the county have applied for detachment from the Harbor District. I have no independent information regarding this finding at this time. On finding 10, the district infrequently performs lease analysis and price rate benchmarking. I agree with the finding. On finding 11, the district has been operating on a 23-year-old Pillar Point Harbor master plan. I agree with the finding. On finding 12, the Santa Cruz Port District successfully weaned itself from the use of property tax revenues while continuing to provide non-enterprise services and balancing its budget. I have no independent information regarding this finding at this time. On the recommendations,
Commissioner Brennan, how much more time would you like that?
I'm almost through.
Thank you.
I just want to finish the recommendations. I did all the findings. R1, which is recommendation 1, the local agency formation commission will initiate a service review of the Harbor District by December 31st, 2014. I agree with this finding and will closely follow the LAFCO service review of the Harbor District. Recommendation 2, the County Board of Supervisors will begin the process of dissolution of the Harbor District by December 31st, 2014. I suggest that this recommendation be reevaluated if the November 2014 election reconstitutes the board with a majority of reformers. I would like the Harbor District to work cooperatively with the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors regarding improved governance solutions for the special district. Recommendation 3, the Harbor District will commence study by September 1, 2014 of the Santa Cruz Port District as a model for financial planning and reporting to provide clarity to enterprise, non-enterprise revenue and expense categories. I agree with the recommendation. Recommendation 4, the Harbor District will develop a plan to eliminate the use of property tax revenue for offsetting enterprise losses by March 30th, 2015. I agree with the recommendation. Recommendation 5, the Harbor District will standardize detailed quarterly financial reporting at commission meetings by March 30th, 2015. I agree with the recommendation. Recommendation 6, the Harbor District will identify a successor agency to assume control of the West Trail by December 31st, 2014. And the West Trail, for clarification, is the trail out to Maverick's surf spot. I agree with the Harbor District. I agree the Harbor District is not responsibly managing the sensitive marine habitat in this visitor-serving area, and I wish the other commissioners would support the following improvements. The Harbor District needs to take action to fix the eroding trail, provide a new restroom facility, and improve the parking lot, or identify a successor agency who will agree to fix the eroding trail, provide a new restroom facility, and improve the parking lot in the near future. The parking lot must be resurfaced in a way that protects the surrounding marine environment. The restroom facility is extremely inadequate. Recommendation 7, the Harbor District will explore transferring or cost sharing with the City of Half Moon Bay the co-sponsorship with the Army Corps of Engineers of the Surfers Beach dredging operation by December 31st, 2014. I agree with the recommendation. Recommendation 8, the Harbor District will continue to seek interested parties to acquire non-revenue producing surplus properties. I agree with the recommendation. Currently, the Harbor District has not gone through a proper public process for selling the surplus property in El Granada. Recommendation 9, the Harbor District will explore the outsourcing of management of all commercial real properties to a real estate management firm by December 31st, 2014. I agree with the recommendation. Recommendation 10, as soon as possible after the November 2014 Harbor Commission election, the Harbor District will form standing and appropriate ad hoc committees which meet regularly. I agree with the recommendation. Recommendation 11, this is the last one. Harbor District Commissioners and General Manager will earn Special District Leadership Foundation certificates by July 1st, 2015. I agree with the recommendation. Thank you.
All right. Now, go over to my left, Commissioner Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have nothing but respect for those who serve on the civil grand jury. After all, they are citizens just like all of you are citizens. They're appointed by the Superior Court bench, and they're given what I would consider an arduous, tedious undertaking. Unfortunately, in some cases, when the investigations become very technical, as was the case with the Harbor District, it's beyond the reach of many of the people who serve. As well-meaning as they are, they're not investigators by nature. And the individuals that questioned me at the grand jury were articulate and were bright, and I had no problem. Although I found that I spent more time in oratory than I did answering their specific questions. And I think they appreciated that. My findings and discussion of, and recommendations and discussion of, were all written as requested and are part of the public record. But I think the grand jury, in its investigation, became politicized. Why or how, I don't know. And quite frankly, right now, I don't really care, because we're responding to what I thought was an injustice. And we will get to that. It seems to me that the report that I read was very articulate, very well written, very professional. I don't know that that level of competence and professionalism exists with regular citizenry. This was a report that you could not have paid to have written. And then I find myself wondering, were the reports dictated into a machine and someone typed them from that? Did they take poetic license with the comments and statements that were made or the notes that were taken? So those are the kinds of things that I guess concern me. I've been here 16 years and have had a great pleasure in serving the community for 16 years. I've been through a few grand jury reports. I believe I was president twice when the reports came out, 2 different terms. I have never seen such a deep, transparent opening of a report that I have this one. All of us, all 5 of us, wrote every finding and every recommendation and spent time discussing it. It's all part of the public record, as I said, and it's there for you to read. And we're going to go through it again this evening, as a couple of my colleagues have begun already the process. I want to applaud the president for the manner in which he's organized this, and I want to applaud Mr. Grinnell and Steve Miller, our counsel, in the manner in which they've guided us down this path. I have never seen a report gone through so thoroughly and carefully as this report. And I'm very proud of the process, wherever it takes us. And we know, unfortunately, the splash that the civil grand jury report receives when it comes out will not be the splash we receive when we make our reply. And it just doesn't work that way. But that's how the process works. That's what we live with. And that's our democracy. But Mr. President, again, I applaud you and I applaud staff for the manner in which you've taken on this task. It's a Herculean task. And I think we're going to be okay as a result of your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Tucker. And to my right, Commissioner Bernardo.
Thank you. I'm just going to keep this brief. I want to echo some of the words that my colleagues have said, that I personally take this civil grand jury report very seriously, and with all due respect to the civil grand jury, I find that this report creates confusion and at times contradicts itself. And as you'll see from my responses in the packet, I disagree with most of the findings. I do want to highlight a couple of things, and that is that, number one, the San Mateo County Harbor District was created in 1933 by the Board of Supervisors and granted county-wide jurisdiction, which makes us very unique from other special districts. So any type of comparison, for example, to the Santa Cruz port is apples to oranges. A key difference about the San Mateo County Harbor District is that we operate 2 harbors, and each harbor has unique features, both operationally and financially. A couple of things I'd also like to highlight. I do disagree, along with all of my colleagues, that the Harbor District should not be dissolved because any potential successor agency will not have the expertise, technical knowledge, or specialized training that our harbor staff requires. It's also important to note that the San Mateo County civil grand juries of 2001 and 2002 did not in any way suggest or recommend dissolution, only this 2014 grand jury report. Couple more things. I disagree that commissioners are not receiving timely and adequately detailed financial reporting, because in addition to our monthly statements, we receive quarterly investment reports, annual external audit reports, as well as annual budget workshops. It's a lot of numbers. And finally, I want to say that we do have a fiduciary responsibility for the public, and we hold the public's trust. But it's also important to remember that we also oversee non-revenue generating assets as well. For example, one would be the West Trail. The Harbor District does not derive revenues from this trail, but we maintain it because its very purpose is purely for public enjoyment and open space, which is very important to the district. And finally, I just want to say that if there's only one thing that I do agree with in the report, and that is board dynamics. I just want to briefly say that board dynamics occur in every jurisdiction, on every city council, in every special district, and you're going to have commissioners and board members agreeing, disagreeing, sometimes disagreeing, sometimes being unanimous. But that's part of the public process. And to insinuate that people should all march to the same drum or should all vote a certain way or should dissolve a district because people have differing opinions, I think that's just very flawed in itself. And if you're going to extend that analogy, then I think you can get rid of quite a few city councils that exist out there because of board dynamics. So I just want to finally say that again, with all due respect to the civil grand jury, I do find that this report does a great disservice to the public because of a lot of the inaccuracies and misinformation that it provides. And again, in my response that I've submitted in the packet, that you can see a lot of my my reasoning is there. So I just want to say thank you. And again, thank you, Mr. President, for guiding us through this sort of challenging, and navigating us through this very challenging report. Thank you.
Thank you. And my comments, probably to sum up being president during a time when our commission receives a civil grand jury report as extensive as the one we received, is a challenge. I think I came onto taking the role of president about the same time that this report was released. So my first reaction to the report when I was interviewed by the media was, yes, these are very serious allegations. There was a lot in the title of the civil grand jury report that referred to a lot of the title itself, the price of dysfunction, was alarming. But my first reaction when I was interviewed was, I appreciated the report. It gives us a time for us commissioners to galvanize our leadership and our responsibilities to the public and our constituents in a way that can be organized, in a way that can be transparent and be very open. I said this before at our last meeting. All 5 commissioners own this report, and all 5 commissioners are going to have a response have a responsibility to the response to this report. And that is why I intend to have this a very orderly process where the public is involved, the commissioners are involved, and the staff is involved. Having said that, I believe that what I see in our meeting packet this evening are supporting documents that answer justly, that answer truthfully, and answer openly to each recommendation and finding of the civil grand jury report. I'm really impressed with the responsibilities that my fellow commissioners have shown during this very difficult time and a very short timetable. Having meeting only twice a month creates a not so open of a process where we can address and approve a response for the civil grand jury. And that is why you notice in this evening's agenda, it is extremely short. About 90% of it is devoted to this agenda item. And I hope that the public takes this as a way that the commission cares and wants to answer the civil grand jury report in a way that is open, in a way that is understood, and is a way that will move us forward. So we can remove that title, "What is the price of dysfunction?" into a title of, we have a very successful San Mateo County Harbor District. So having said that, and having heard my fellow commissioners with their opening statements, I would like to turn over for the public, for an opportunity for the public to give us public comment. And as I said in my announcement of the process, we do have a policy of 3-minute public comment. But for this evening, I have the support of my fellow commissioners to extend that 3 minutes to 5 minutes, if the speaker so chooses. So my first speaker card is Mr. Warren. And again, the Deputy Secretary will announce when 30 seconds remains in your time.
Thank you. I'm going to hope to finish in much less than 3 minutes. Good evening, Mr. President and Commissioners. I originally didn't come here to speak on this item, but after looking at the comments and hearing some of the discussion, I decided I had to. So I want to start out by saying that...
Could you speak up a little bit? I can't quite hear you.
All right. I've never seen a grand jury report that I disagreed with, and this one's no exception. I think the grand jury, at least in this county, does outstanding work. And so explicitly, I agree with each and every finding and recommendation. One of the problems with this district is basically county-wide special districts shouldn't exist. State law needs to be changed to completely, absolutely disallow county-wide special districts. Zeroing in on one of the points that had a lot of discussion in the various commissioner responses, there's an argument that a successor agency won't have the expertise to do what the Harbor District does. But that's a straw man argument, because the successor agency, which would almost certainly be the county, would simply hire all of the field staff. And that's where they get the expertise. It's not like the staff that the county has is sitting around on their hands with plenty of free time. So obviously, they would have to increase the staff to handle those functions, and the obvious way to do it is just hire all the field staff. As far as board dynamics, for my first 2 years on my board, it was a bitterly divided 3-2 board. But there was never, and I mean never, any of the animosity that I've seen on this board. There was never any attempt to stifle the minority. The minority directors were given however much time they wanted. They were not cut off. Anything they wanted on the agenda was put on the agenda. They just never had the votes to get what they wanted. But there was no attempt by the board majority to paint them into a corner and keep them from saying anything or doing anything. And so for that reason, I totally agree with the grand jury's approach on the dynamics on this board are just fundamentally flawed. Unless there's a sea change at the next election, there is no hope for this commission, and it should be dissolved if the incumbents get reelected. Thank you.
Okay, next, Mr. John Olem.
Thank you for the extension of time. Appreciate that. I hope I don't need it. Okay, I'm going to be all over the place, obviously, because there's a lot to respond to. There's two parts to my speech here. Mostly it's about just your financial condition and the things you said about it. But, Mr. Tucker, if you want to get this report the splash you think it deserves, I suggest that you make sure it's included in the report that your opinion is that some of those grand jurors were not up to the task. That it's your opinion that the report is of a quality that is above and beyond what the people you talk to are capable of producing. I assume you're accusing somebody of ghostwriting the report for them who was not part of the grand jury. That's a serious charge. And that you've somehow come to the conclusion that the grand jury is politicized. That's an important thing that you want to add into your statement if you want to get that splash. Some things that will also help you get that splash is to point out that Mr. Holsinger has called for an investigation of the grand jury. I guarantee you, if you make that the headline, you will get a splash and there will be some notice to what your response is. And last, Mr. Grinnell's got the best one. Right off the bat, from day one, he's decided that the grand jury is corrupt and purposely lied to the public in order to deceive them. Now, you want that splash, that'll get you some splash. Okay, Mr. Parvano, I thought your answers were really honest, and I appreciate that you actually did appear to read the thing and tried to give non-politicized answers that weren't in any way construed to benefit you. You other three, I don't know about. Okay, let's see. You did make one point that was good, and I'll lead into my next one, is you agreed that you disagreed with the financial reporting, that the grand jury said you weren't getting good financial reporting. In fact, you have been getting excellent financial reporting. Your budget director or finance director, I'm not really sure what her title is, Ms. Deborah Galazar, is in top of her game. You know, there was some question about, one of them about her abilities. The lady knows what she's talking about, and she's honest, and she puts it out there, and I suspect that's why she's never here. Okay, on to the financial condition. I've passed out this to a lot of people. I've kept a few copies for anybody who needs one. You will notice on the first page, cash reserves. This comes from the budget packet, or the presentation that was made to all of you back in April, I believe it was, by your finance director. And she starts off, she goes through the report and all that. I shouldn't say she starts off, but she gets to the cash reserves. And she shows you that your cash reserves are declining and will continue to decline straight down. That's what the graph shows. Don't need to be an accountant. Don't need to be an expert on this. The grand jury can comprehend this kind of stuff because everybody else in here can comprehend what that line implies. But that wasn't enough. Maybe it wasn't. The next slide from your finance director. Why are cash reserves declining? Now, you don't spend reserves if you're balancing your budget, Mr. Bernardo. You just don't. The only reason you spend your reserves is you're spending more money than you take in. And she makes that clear for you. Last thing here, Operational revenue and taxes cover about 70% of all costs. The remaining 30% come out of reserves. This has been going on for a decade, and you know it. Mr. Parvano, I know you do know it. You might notice on their cash reserves graph a blip where it bounces up. This is selling of assets and the restructuring of loans because they almost were in default with the Department of Boating and Waterways, or whatever that acronym is, on the loan that they brag about paying off a year early, which is simply going to be they're going to give the deposit that they are required to hold until they pay off the loan. So we're running out of time. How are we redressing declining capital reserves? Reducing capital expenditures. Capital expenditures are the things that you spend money on to keep your infrastructure going, as the fishermen understand, that if you don't spend money on capital expenditures, your widget breaks. Mr. Holsinger, you continually use, I guess it would be called a straw man argument. I've never used that one before, about what the meaning of depreciation is. Again, your finance director, at that meeting, you can go see it on tape for yourselves, explain that you have to account for depreciation because if you're not making enough money to cover the depreciation of your widgets or gadgets or whatever, they break. So even though you think you're doing good, you don't have any money to fix or run your harbor when you finally run out of working widgets. I see I've gone past my time. I appreciate that I've gone as far as I did. I hope you all look at these numbers and then evaluate their contentions that the grand jury doesn't get finance. And look at that graph and see if you're smart enough to
The
figure out
next
what that
speaker
is.
is Ms. Nicole David.
Good evening, Commissioners. Nicole David, Half Moon Bay. I was very concerned when I read the responses to the recent grand jury report that have been submitted by the Commissioners. There were 12 findings and 11 recommendations to be addressed, and instead of using this opportunity to improve district actions and to consider them for future decisions, the majority of the Commissioners just denied and disagreed with them. I actually counted the answers for each commissioner, and one commissioner disagreed with 92% of the findings and called the recommendations nonsensical, unreasonable, and unwarranted. Recommendations were made by the grand jury for more frequent lease analysis and for forming committees that meet with some kind of regularity. In my mind, these are recommendations that could really improve the work of the district and help with careful oversight over finances and other tasks. But the district's response to those recommendations were mainly that the Harbor District is not legally required to do that. And while the commissioners all responded or denied all of the recommendations and findings, including that the Harbor District is operating at a significant yearly loss and the lack of detail and transparency in financial reporting, you did not address the concern that I think is most important in my mind. Budgets can be fixed and accounting systems can be updated, but more important to me is that the grand jury report says that the public has lost confidence in the reasonable governance of the commission and the district. And I would like to quote here, the grand jury believes that due to a lack of oversight, ineffective and inefficient governance, and the unwieldy sprawl of the services it provides, the Harbor District has lost the public's trust in its management of the public's money, end of quote. This is going to be the most difficult problem for this commission to fix because the majority of commissioners do not even welcome the opportunity to improve the district based on the grand jury recommendations and take the concerns into considerations. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Mr. Bud Ratz.
Thank you. I've spoken before many times about a lot of the details in the grand jury report regarding finances and other things. And I have some differences understanding that some of the people on the board, we have some differences. But we cannot deny that according to the actual audited financial statements that there is a structural budget deficit. We've talked about that in the future. And if we follow Commissioner Holsinger's reasoning that there's not, then we have a very flawed budget process because there's complete divergence at that point in time. Debating all these fine things, though, really misses what I think is the really important issue as to what brought us all to this point tonight. And President Parviano touched upon it. But I think it's a set of governance issues. The report, I was concerned about the response to the report because it didn't really address this basic issue. Why did the grand jury feel that it had to do a report on the Harbor Commission? And I think there's several things that have not been addressed over the years in terms of governance and other things, that the consistent operation of the district with its structural budget deficit for 10 years created questions. I think there was a loss of public confidence through the lack of financial transparency and not providing current financial reports which would monitor managerial effectiveness. The loss of public confidence by demonstrating a willingness actually to stifle public input and not engaging in effective dialogue with the public through possible committee structures and other things. The loss of public confidence by not accommodating effective dialogue amongst the commissioners at board meetings, limiting commissioners' input when it did not coincide with the majority of the budget of the commission. And I also sense a strong resistance to change by the members of the commission. You need to really look at what brought you to this point and why did the county grand jury feel that it had to issue a report. I think it goes much deeper than just say, well, it's been in the newspapers, there's been conflict above the board meeting and so on. Why? Why? What is happening to this organization that it reached this point? Those are basic questions that really need to be answered. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I would like to make a motion for discussion purposes that we adopt a response to the grand jury report that includes A, the staff proposed introductory materials, and B, the response to each finding and recommendation that is identified as a draft response that staff has prepared. If I could have a second on that.
I have a point of
I'll second
order.
the motion for purposes of discussion, Mr. President.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any comments, questions on the motion?
I have a question. It wasn't clear to me what you're asking us to approve right now. Is it just the commissioner comments on the findings and the recommendations, or are you also wrapping this draft report that we only got at 2:30 today into the motion?
I am asking, in the motion was the staff proposed introductory materials, which are they are named the third purple page. And then B is the synthesis, which is the last purple page. And yes, it does include the auditor's edits.
Well, I need time to read that.
In the draft, yeah.
So I propose that we take a break so that I can actually read this, because I didn't get it till 2:30 today. And look at it, it's full of new information that we've never seen before.
So,
Take 5 minutes.
hearing that, we can break and reconvene at 7:20?
Okay.
Oh, wait, let's see which clock we're looking at here. Okay, I'm sorry, let's look at this red clock here. Instead of 7:20, 7:25. Or the red clock.
Okay.
All right? So the meeting is convened until 7:25. For discussion purposes, that we adopt a response to the grand jury report that includes A, the staff proposed introductory materials, and B, the response to each finding and recommendation that is identified as the draft response that staff has prepared. So what is the pleasure of the commission? Any questions, comments?
I have none.
No. Couple, please, if I may.
Please.
Thank you. I'd like to first go to page 81 of 97.
Of the
The draft response to the findings and recommendations, specifically finding number 5.
finding number 5?
Yeah, and these are limited issues. First of all, the last sentence of the first paragraph of the draft response, I simply suggest it may not be necessary. That's number 1. And to the extent that any of the other commissioners wish to discuss it and may have the same sentiments, then we may consider modification, but it's not one that without someone else chiming in.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The last sentence,
Of which page again?
page 81 of 97, of the first paragraph of the draft response.
My draft response is not numbered.
Page 81 of 97.
It's the last purple page.
You're looking at the edited one? The one from the auditor?
It's in your packet.
It says draft in big letters.
That's been edited by the auditor.
Not
Aren't we?
everything.
Huh?
I think you're looking at a different one.
Can I get a point of clarification from the staff?
The auditor's proposed modifications were to the prose introductory response. I'm not referring to that.
Oh, you're talking about the, all the comments? Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. What was the page number again? 80? Because mine only goes to 71. What was the page number?
81 of 97.
Okay, well, I'm still not looking at it. I've got commissioner comments organized by findings and recommendations. Is that what we're looking at?
No.
The purple page headlines are Commissioner comments / responses to findings and recommendations of the Civil Grand Jury Report filed on July 9, 2014, and draft staff synthesis.
The pages all have the big word draft across the page.
That's the same, that's obsolete now, right? Aren't we working with the auditor's version?
No. I think it's just auditor's comments.
Auditor's comments are only for the introductories.
Could I get some clarification here from the staff?
auditor's response is only for the introductory response. Introductory, that's not what this is.
But it says the same things. It's got the same content in it.
No, it doesn't.
If we're talking about the thing that has draft printed all over it, it's the earlier version before the auditor's version was emailed to us today. That's what I was just reading. I was just reading that with all the edits, the auditor's version. Are we talking about the auditor's version or an earlier version?
We're talking about the one that you got that's included in your packet.
Why would we discuss the one included in our board packet?
Because this is just the auditor's response to draft introductory response, just like it says it on the front.
But the auditor's response is the most recent edited version, correct?
No.
Not in the draft.
The auditor's response is just the auditor's response.
It's the same document, though, but it's got a bunch of new copy in the auditor's response, which...
If I might address this from my perspective, there's a motion on the floor to approve a response to the grand jury report that consists of two things, as I understood the motion. That response would consist, number one, of the introductory statement, which is the edited version of that introductory statement which you are talking about, plus, as a second piece of the response, as required by law, responses to each individual finding and recommendation, which would be made up of the staff's draft synthesis response to each finding, and that those two pieces would make up the total response. As I understood Mr. Holsinger's question, he was referring not to that introductory statement, but to the requested response specifically to finding number 5, which was in my agenda packet on page 81 of 97.
Okay, so that, I think you just said the same thing I said. So that means that this draft version included in our board packet is garbage at this point, right? Because we're using the auditor's version.
No, I do not believe that's what I was saying.
Well, which version are we supposed to, which version is included in the motion?
Okay, let's back up. Commissioner Holsinger referred to an item on page 81 of 97. If you could please find that.
Mr. President, I would be pleased to withdraw my express comment as it appears that 3 of the other commissioners don't have an interest in visiting that one particular phrase or sentence and removing it. Therefore, there would not be in my opinion, a vote of 3 or more votes to eliminate that one sentence. So I'll simply withdraw my comment and question for possible consideration.
I don't even have page 81, so I'd like to know what you were asking to change. I'm trying to
I
find...
wasn't asking to change anything. I was asking to raise it as a discussion point to see if any of the other commissioners thought that might be appropriate as well, too. I'll withdraw the proposal. So that leaves the motion on the floor. I have no other comments.
And I have no comments.
On the proposed motion.
And I have no comments, Mr. President.
Commissioner Bernard.
I just want to keep it very brief that I want to thank staff. I really would like to thank staff, including our council, on putting this together because it's a very complex process, I know, especially when you have to order the commissioners' comments alphabetically and thematically, and then having to synthesize it. I mean, this is a lot of work, and that's why I just want to thank staff for taking the time to really organize all of this and help us kind of guide through this evening. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay,
I have comments when it's my turn.
Please, go ahead.
Okay, so I still don't understand what we're doing here. Are we deciding whether or not to approve the auditor's version of the, what are we calling this? Draft introductory statement of proposed district response to civil grand jury report filed on July 9th, 2014.
Yes.
Is that part of the motion?
Yes.
So this is my opportunity to discuss the auditor's version, which was presented to us at 2:30 today.
Plus the draft version of a different report.
Plus
The rest of the document.
plus the comments from commissioners. And just for a point of clarification, the comments from commissioners haven't been edited. They're just exactly how they were provided to staff, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that, all right. So I don't have anything to say about that part. I mean, I think the commissioners' comments stand on their own, and I don't have any comments about those. I've already made it clear what my comments were. And if anybody wants to read the other commissioners' comments, they can find the board packet available online on the Harbor District's website. As far as the report that I received today at 2:35, I do have some comments. This is not the report that I would have put together, but I'll work with what we've got here. So on page, by the way, it's not numbered, so page 2, it says, a brief list of the district's critical functions will suffice to demonstrate its irreplaceable value to the county. And then there's a list of bullet points. I'm not going to read all of them. The third bullet point, it says the county, mid-coast, local coastal programs, public access policies explicitly encourage the Harbor District to continue efforts to provide visitor facilities and public access trails and related facilities. And it references Mid-Coast Local Coastal Program, 10.49 and 11.30. Goes on to say, well, let's take that one. Earlier I mentioned concerns about the West Shoreline Access Trail. In the report, it calls it the West Trail, but technically it's the West Shoreline Access Trail, which is a trail next to Pillar Point Marsh that takes people out to the Mavericks Surf Break and Beach, and is extremely popular. It has a dirt parking lot, and it's in really poor condition. It's been in poor condition as long as I can remember, and I've brought this up multiple times before with the board. We have a very unfortunate situation going on with the restroom facility there, which has just been called by the public the nastiest head on the coast. That's the nickname. And also the parking lot itself is extremely uneven, and there's a lot of dirt and runoff going right into the marsh. So the situation with the parking lot is having a negative impact on the marsh, which is part of the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve and is an area of special biologic significance and home to a lot of wildlife, including birds and plants and marine life. So, you know, it's so past due that something's got to be done there. And I think it's really important to note that that area needs help. We also have the trail, which is eroding and is partially inaccessible now. It's fallen into the harbor. That needs to be dealt with. I know that the staff has been working with the Coastal Commission to some extent, but it seems like this project is really it's happening very slowly. I also wanted to mention that in relation to providing visitor facilities, it should be noted that the restroom access at Surfers Beach is incredibly compromised. There is a restroom at the Pillar Point RV lot, which has been in that location since before the Harbor District ever had an RV lot to lease, and there are photos of it dating back to the 70s. For some reason, the leasee decided to put locks on the bathroom doors some years ago and then turned the bathroom into a private laundry facility. I don't know if it's been converted back to a restroom. I haven't been in there lately, but I know that it's still locked today, and the only way you can get access to the restroom is if you can find the camp host, knock on their RV door, and then get them to give you a key to go use the restroom. And by that point, your kids are probably, you know, in trouble. So these are the types of visitor serving facilities that have not been adequately addressed for decades, really. And every time they come up at board meetings, it just seems that the will of the commission isn't there to actually take action and find the grant money or do what's necessary to really improve our visitor facilities. So there are other visitor facilities issues which we should talk about in the future, many, and I won't belabor the point, so I'll keep moving. It says here in the next bullet point that the Harbor District has responded to over 100 distress calls per year for ocean service and rescue. It has received a commendation from the U.S. Coast Guard for its critical public safety efforts. And I think this is a good point to include because unlike Oyster Point Marina, which is fairly accessible for the Coast Guard because of where they're based out of, there is good rescue potential at Oyster Point and emergency response time from the Coast Guard. That's not the case with Pillar Point Harbor, which is remote and located on the coast, not on the bay. And it is vital for our commercial fishermen, our recreational boaters, and our visitors, our surfers, our paddleboarders, our kayakers, everybody to have search and rescue on the coast side. And in fact, we should probably be looking at how we could expand that service because it could be better than what we have now. And that's not something that the board has looked at in any times that I can recall, but I think it's something we should be looking at because I think our search and rescue program is what makes this special district unique and valuable. And in past LAFCO reports, our search and rescue response and staff has been noted as a reason to keep the special district as a special district. And I think, we ought to be looking at how to improve that program and expand it to provide the best response and rescue we can and find ways to work even more collaboratively than we already are with the fire district and the sheriffs and the various other public safety agencies. The next point is the Pillar Point facility is a state-designated harbor of refuge for the fishing fleet and other vessels, namely a port harbor, inlet, or other body of water normally sheltered from heavy seas by land in which a vessel can navigate and safely moor. And this is taken right out of Harbors and Navigation Code section 70.3. I think it's important to mention that. However, it's also important to mention that we have had a huge number of complaints from our recreational boaters who had their checks lost and then liens were placed on their boats, and then they had to go try to deal with all kinds of bureaucratic red tape to get that sorted out due to the pile of missing checks. We've had many problems for the commercial fishing fleet since 2012 when this board, before I was elected, approved the highest commercial fishing fees in the state of California. And that has had a really devastating effect on our commercial fishing fleet.
Commissioner Brennan, I think we're getting off the topic here. This is, the motion is to approve the documents that were stated, and I think we're
one of the things mentioned here is about transparency and about the flow of information and not shutting down our fellow board members. So, this is my one chance to comment, and I think I do need to comment on this, and I'm sorry it's a little bit long-winded, but I'm going to try to move through it as fast as I can.
Right, but this bullet, I don't see where anything to do with missing checks has anything to do with this bullet.
Well, it's my comment.
So could you please be a little more focused on your comments to the report?
I think that my comments are specific to the report, but I understand you don't. I think we'll have to agree to disagree. So I wanted to also mention that the other issue with commercial fishing recently has been back in 2012, there were 3 fish buying leases which were renewed and they were redrafted. I guess that would be a better way to describe it, not renewed, but they were essentially new fish buying leases. Those 3 leases contain language that was changed at the 11th hour. And that language change indicated that it allowed the harbor master the ability to allow a fish buyer to have an additional hoist in a completely new location. This was a change. That wasn't included in the past leases in the same way. And the fish buyers were not told of the language change. In fact, they were provided with leases with no redlining and no italicized changes indicated. So they had no way of knowing that in these thick leases, there was this tiny little change that could have a major impact on their businesses. That's just another example of problems with the way our leases have been handled. Our general manager has been very involved with our legal counsel on the leases. And I think going forward, we need to find a different way of doing that. We need to have a consultant handle it, or somebody who can conduct revising leases or devising new leases in a more professional way. We should never give tenants a new version of a lease without indicating what the changes are to the lease. And in this case, there were several drafts provided at various times to these leaseholders with changes, and it was like, again, like looking for a needle in a haystack. They were told that there was nothing substantial changed, and they believed it, and then it turned out that that wasn't the case. So there was as a result of that, there was a hoist that was essentially given away to a fish buyer, and many of the fishermen and other fish buyers contend that that was an act of preferential treatment, and that one fish buyer was being offered something as essentially like a freebie that the other fish buyers were not being offered. This has harmed the whole let's just say the whole atmosphere around Pillar Point Harbor has really shifted since that happened. And it should also be noted that that hoist that was allowed to be installed by our harbor master and our general manager is not allowed to be used today because the staff did not get the proper permits from the Coastal Commission.
Commissioner, can you please remind me where in the motion are you referring to?
I'm talking about where it says here we've got. I shouldn't have to explain this. I should just be able to make my comment.
I think for the benefit.
Please let me continue.
Please explain what you're referring to in the motion.
It talks about our Pillar Point Harbor being a commercial fishing refuge or port, and that over 50% of our slips are supposed to be, or 50% of our slips are supposed to be specifically for commercial fishing.
Harbor refuge has nothing to do with slips and docks.
Well, I think it's related, so I'm going to finish up. So anyway, if I could not be interrupted, I could get through this a lot quicker.
Well, I would appreciate just staying focused to the motion.
So I think it's important to note that the hoist was unpermitted, and so therefore...
Again, I'm asking you to stay focused on the motion.
These are issues that I feel are relevant to the grand jury report.
Can you please explain to me where you're referring to?
These are issues that I think are relevant to the grand jury report. Could you please, for once, I'd like to ask this board, just for once, not to cut me off. I mean, it's every meeting, and just for once, this one time, could you please just let me make my comment?
I have problems, and I want to adhere to this process. And also, I believe Robert's Rules of Order states that once a motion is made, that there could be a total of 2 5-minute opportunities for commissioners to speak to it.
Earlier, you said that we were going to have an opportunity
when
to
a motion
fully
is made,
discuss.
a motion has been made on the floor, and that's what guides us right now. There were opportunities before under commissioners' deliberations and opening statements.
I haven't even gotten to 1/3.
We're moving forward.
So you're cutting me off.
We are moving forward. There's a motion on the floor.
So we're not going to discuss the grand jury report. That's what's happening here. We're not being allowed to discuss it.
There is a motion on the floor.
You're moving ahead to approve this, which means there'll be no further opportunity for me to discuss the grand jury
There's
report.
been ample opportunity.
I really feel like this is shameful. I do, and I have to say
Mr. Miller,
something.
could you please explain Robert's Rules of Order when it comes to...
Robert's Rules of Order are not necessarily designed to answer the dilemma that you find yourselves in right now, I'm afraid. You have a motion on the floor, you have a disagreement as to whether one commissioner's comments are focused enough on the motion at hand. Robert's rules would allow motions to limit or extend debate in any circumstances, but Robert's rules does not provide the answer to what I see as the dilemma as to whether or not these comments are focused on the motion at hand.
Does it provide a time limitation?
Excuse me?
Does it provide a time limitation?
So Robert's Rules does provide a time limitation that in the absence of other rules, ordinarily speaking after a discussion on a motion is limited to 10 minutes per speaker in the aggregate. However, there is, again, Robert's Rules not being the perfect fit for every situation. There's also question in my mind whether that rule applies strictly to a legislative body or whether it was designed to apply to a non-legislative body. So I think it's really up to you commissioners to decide how much time you want to afford your colleagues or not. I'm afraid I cannot give
Mr.
you
President,
a
I
legal
rise to,
answer.
thank you, sir. Mr. President, I rise to a point of order. My colleague has spoken for over 14 minutes on this particular motion, having had the opportunity to speak for 5 or longer minutes in opening remarks, which she chose to use for findings and recommendations, and to have other opportunities to speak prior to now. She's exceeded what I believe is Robert's Rules of Order of 10 minutes by at least 4 minutes, and that's a courtesy, I think.
Point of personal prerogative, or privilege, please. It was my understanding that the chair originally, that Mr. President, you originally said that there would be 5 minutes allotted for the initial comments, that there was then subject to the approval of 2/3 of the sitting commissioners here at the meeting to extend that. When I went past my 5 minutes, I asked for that show of the 2/3 approval, and I believe I got it. So if we have this 10-minute general limitation of Robert's Rules of Order, and Commissioner Brennan, by my count, has gone over 15 minutes on it, I believe it would call for simply you to determine whether or not there's a 2/3 agreement for her to go longer.
Mr. President, before you're asked to make a ruling like that, I would ask my colleagues to extend Commissioner Brennan an additional 5 minutes.
I would second that.
I'll agree.
Okay,
Okay.
5 minutes commencing now.
So just to finish off my point, the hoist that was installed on Johnson Pier and approved by our general manager and by our harbor master per that language that was added to the leases without the fish buyers all being aware of the language change. That hoist has not been used. It's been there for several months because our staff did not seek the permits required to have the leases, to have the hoist installed. So that meant that the county didn't approve it through their permitting process, and neither did the Coastal Commission. So right now, everybody's wondering what's that hoist doing there and why hasn't it been used? Well, the Coastal Commission is reviewing the matter, and they have held it up, and they haven't made any decision, and I don't know when they will. But meanwhile, it's there, and it's definitely caused a lot of distress amongst the fishing community because it's in a location where people contend it's not safe. There wasn't a safety plan put in place. There were no provisions to address safety, and we have some serious public safety concerns going on at Pillar Point at Johnson Pier. So I'm going to keep moving. The next item, it says the Harbor District's outstanding environmental stewardship resulted in the 2013 award of the Clean Marina certification for both district harbors by the state Clean Marina program. That's true, and I'm really glad that we are part of the Clean Marina program. However, I feel like it's disingenuous because it doesn't mention the fact that there was a sewer pipe with a leak, let's just say a leaky sewer pipe, located underneath Johnson Pier that was not disclosed to the Clean Marina inspectors when they came through. And at the time of the inspection, our staff was well aware of the problem with the pipe because the staff had reported it to management. And the Clean Marina people were not told about it. This is what I was told by the Clean Marina folks. So it's that sort of thing that really makes you wonder about how we can say that we have outstanding environmental stewardship. It's like we could say that, but we're not walking the walk here. And then we've got the latest debacle with the fuel dock, which was talked about earlier. And I've got I've got information from Moffitt Nickel here, which indicates that back in December of 2013, Moffitt Nickel recommended to our management that we needed to replace the fuel dock. Well, they never brought that to the board. I'd never heard of it, and it wasn't until I put in a Public Records Act request to find out what Moffitt Nickel had said that I came across that and realized that our fuel dock should have already been replaced by now, and it's inadequate. So that's something that this board needs to address. So to essentially greenwash things and say that we have outstanding environmental stewardship, there just isn't enough evidence to show that we actually can claim that. So I'm concerned. I want us to have outstanding environmental stewardship. I really want us to have that, but we've got to do a lot better before we can honestly say that to people. And then moving on, I'm sure I'm going to get cut off any second. It says here that Pillar Point Harbor is an increasingly popular regional visitor destination and location for special events on the Mid-Coast, as well as blah, blah, blah. Well, that's true, and we do need to be a visitor destination, and we do need to provide things like the Coastal Trail for our visitors and the Bay Trail. But, this board voted not to allow the Half Moon Bay International Marathon to use the Coastal Trail for their marathon and forced the marathon onto Highway 1, which blocked traffic and created a potential emergency situation. It doesn't make sense to me that a local marathon would not be able to access the Coastal Trail on the Harbor District's property, and that's something that just doesn't jive with what's included in this report. And there's so many other things. I have so many notes here, and this board just will not allow me to get to them, so I'm going to leave it there.
Hey, Commissioner Bernardo, any comments?
Oh, I've already made my comments earlier.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. During the public comment, I had heard comments regarding the finances, and there are three findings that address on the civil grand jury report that address financial issues. One, F2 is the district's financial reporting meets the Governmental Accounting Standards Board requirements. F3, commissioners are not receiving timely and adequately detailed financial reporting to support fully informed decisions. And F7 is that the operating losses for the last 5 fiscal years are approximately $18.3 million. And then recommendations, R5 is that the recommendations from the civil grand jury is that the Harbor District will standardize detailed quarterly financial reporting at commission meetings by March 30th, 2015. I asked my fellow commissioners, are there anything that you heard this evening from public comment that would warrants edits, changes to the staff draft response?
Regarding the finances?
Regarding the comments that we heard from the comments that we heard from public comment, how they are connected to the findings and recommendations listed in the grand jury.
I would offer no changes, Mr. President.
Neither would I.
No. Commissioner Brennan?
I think there should be, you're talking about changes to the draft that we got at 2:30 today?
No.
What are you asking me about? What are the changes you're seeking?
There were findings and recommendations that were listed in the civil grand jury report. This evening we heard public comment. And my goal is to include public comment as much as possible if they are relevant to the findings and recommendations. So, in other words, did you hear anything this evening in the public comment that would may create any changes in the staff or in the commissioners and staff synthesis response?
So you're asking each commissioner if they would change their response based on what they learned from the public tonight?
Right.
Okay, thank you for explaining that.
Mr. President, hearing done, I'm going to call for the question.
Okay, we have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
No.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
President Carbone?
Aye. Okay, that concludes agenda item number 3. Item number 4 is the El Granada medium strip research listing and property disposition services. I have a speaker slip to this. Okay. Let's start with Mr. Warren, please, on number 4.
Good evening. I've rethought this, and I think I'll just reserve my comments for item 5. Thank you.
For 5. Great, thank you. Number 4, Ms. Fran Pollard, please.
Hi, I'm Fran Pollard of Granada, and good evening, commissioners. This is kind of confusing. I'm not sure whether we should be speaking to 4 or 5, but we wish you would postpone the whole thing, number 4, because of the Granada's district's new title of their reorganization into a community service district provides some opportunity for them to be involved in the parcel sale. That's it, I guess.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about...
Okay, great. Number 4, Mr. Dan Haggerty, please.
Good evening, Honorable Chair and Commissioners. I'd just like to, this is a very confusing, I'm not really quite sure what's happening tonight. The agenda item number 4, to determine the best interest of the district will be to serve without necessity of request for a proposal. I really don't understand that, but I do want to say that it is public record now that the Granada the Granada Community Services District will be up and running in October. And for that point alone, knowing that it's public record and knowing that it's a sensitive piece of property for the community of El Granada, that I would like you to request respectfully to postpone any action on item 4. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, now it's up to General Manager Grinnell for a staff report.
Yes, Mr. President. All this item does is provide a clear path for the Harbor District to have an open, transparent process whereby it will dispose of its post office lot property. All this does is, if you choose to approve it, is to retain real estate services to assist the Harbor District in listing the post office lot property, to provide an open opportunity for the Harbor District to receive purchase requests from anybody, whether it's the Granada Sanitary District or some private individual or another agency or whatever. That's all it does. And for those who may not be aware or remember, the Harbor District did precisely the same thing and went through the same process in disposing of the so-called median or Burnham Strip property a few years ago, whereby, having declared the property surplus and went through the statutorily required steps, which have been done, the Harbor District then was in a position to entertain purchase offers, and eventually they did dispose of the property, interestingly enough, to the Granada Sanitary District. And that's exactly the same process that we're talking about here tonight. No difference. And so what that says for those who have a particular interest is that any individual or entity will have an opportunity to put in an offer to the Harbor District to acquire that property, be it the Fire District or the Granada Sanitary District or anybody from the private sector, any other agency, and that's all.
Okay, thank you.
President, if I may.
Commissioner Tucker.
I received one phone call from an individual wanting to know if we could open up the process. I happen to serve on the committee then with yourself, Mr. President, but I understand now it's with Commissioner Bernardo. And we did have preliminary meetings with the Fire District. But in receiving this phone call, I was informed that there might be other individuals, specifically Granada Sanitary District, or the new district, that may be interested in purchasing the property. So this is an ideal situation for me because this opens it up to anyone. We went through the process of offering it to other public agencies. We passed that 90-day time frame, whatever it was, just like we did with the median strip. And Janet Hill Gray represented us in the median strip transaction, and that went very successfully. And as pointed out, Granada happened to buy that for a holding pond or something of that nature. So I would support, when a motion comes up, I will support this because it does exactly what the caller asked me to do, and it seems to me that it makes the process transparent and it opens it up so anybody outside the agencies that were asked previously has an opportunity to bid on or to purchase this piece of property should we continue in the sale. So when a motion comes up, I will be pleased to support it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holzinger.
Yes, I just mostly have a question, and I'll direct it to legal counsel. So far as I understand it, this motion isn't asking us to engage the services of a particular real estate agent at this time. So,
No?
Yes.
I'm sorry, please go ahead.
is that correct? This is not proposing to engage particular services.
As I understand this motion, it is to ask you to engage a particular individual, Janet Hill Gray.
Okay.
But pursuant to your ordinary policies, you would engage a consultant through a competitive process. And
Right.
so the first two items of this three-part action are to waive the requirements for competition, because under these circumstances, in the best interest of the district,
Okay.
it would be to avoid the competitive process and instead just engage this particular individual.
Okay. And then, so my question to you is in the course of this process, when, if at all, is it necessary for us to go, if at all, is it necessary for us to go into closed session to consider something in terms of engaging this particular broker? It would seem to me, since we're not entertaining an offer to purchase the land, we don't need to go into closed session for that. So this is all something that we can take care of in public here, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, good, thank you. That's all I wanted to make sure of.
And Mr. President, for purposes of discussion, I would move to approve items 1, 2, and 3 under item number 4 and retain the services of Van Hill Gray for research, listing, and property disposition. I would so move.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item number 4. Any comments, discussion, questions? Commissioner Bernardo?
Thank you. I know that there's been some discussion of Janet Hill Gray. I'm not familiar with Janet Hill Gray. Is she here tonight? Oh, she is. Okay. For my benefit, would it be possible for her just to kind of introduce herself and also her services, just so that I'm familiar with a little bit more than what's in the packet, just so before we...
Where's the microphone?
There isn't one.
We don't have
Oh, there isn't one? All
microphones.
right. Good evening. My name is Janet Hill Gray. I work for Coldwell Banker in Half Moon Bay. I have been engaged by the Harbor District in the previous sale and would be pleased to handle it again. I'm a broker with 40 years experience on the coast. I'm experienced in zoning and land use, having served on multiple statewide agencies for that purpose. I am devoted to making sure that things are done correctly. You don't just market property. This particular piece has multiple zoning, as you probably are aware. The front section, next to the post office on the street, is commercial. The back part is residential, R3. Well, you know, that presents a problem. We also have to get what is now known as a certificate of compliance from San Mateo County. That is in reference to an Abernathy decision that came down a couple of years ago, that every undeveloped lot needs to go through the process to make sure that the chain of title has been correct as far back as they have kept records. This is a process that can take 3 to 6 months. It can be costly, and you have to do it before you transfer property. And further into working in that, you need to have a survey and a topo map to go along with it to the county. What we need to do is open a pre-sale escrow to make sure that there are no clouds or unseen liens on this particular property that should not be there. We will successfully manage the mandatory disclosure requirements by the state of California. We will be responsible for handling the natural hazards disclosure and any other mandatory pieces of paper, disclosures, or whatever it takes to get this property sold to a person who is very knowledgeable of what they're getting. Whether it's another agency, you still need someone to negotiate for you. We will be responsible for the marketing, print, internet, multiple listing service, whatever. Barbara and I, my daughter Barbara works with me. We have brought our resumes so you can look those over. And I'm here to answer any and all of your questions.
Thank you for explaining your credentials. They're quite impressive. My question is, you have worked with the district before, so...
Yes, I have.
So just in my mind, what puts you at an advantage is your familiarity with our district.
Yes, I have.
All right,
Yes.
so you understand
Yes, I
us as
understand
a
the
special
agency.
district.
I understand the needs.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
It's
That was my-
complex. This is an extremely complex little parcel of property up there in El Granada.
So you've navigated through these issues before when
Yes, I
we
have.
worked with you before?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right. I'm
answers
going to
my-
give this folder to Mr. Grinnell.
Thank you. And then I have one more comment. I just want to say that because of transparency, and that's the primary reason for me to support this. I like this idea of having an outside representative be an advocate for us, someone who's knowledgeable, has the credentials, has the history. I like this because it will make things fair. That's what I like about
The
it.
goal is to expose it to the market and get the Harbor District the most amount of money.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That
You're quite
concludes my
welcome. Any other questions?
I just wondered if you could maybe say a couple things about how real estate is different in the coastal zone and that there are some development restrictions. Maybe you could talk
all right,
a
I
little
will
bit
certainly
about.
address that. For those of you who don't live on the coast, we have water restrictions from Coastside County Water District. Sewer is available through the Granada Sanitary District. We are in the coastal zone. It's different over there because of the geography and just the perception. And this is a beautiful piece of property. I mean, this is going to be valuable to someone for what they want to do. But selling land on the coast has always been rather a slow, arduous process because there are so many layers of government and so many restrictions. It's not like selling a residential lot. This is commercial and multiple res. So it's complex.
There's also a riparian area. So will it be, has it already been surveyed so that you guys already have something to look at?
No. And we don't know if it's in a riparian or a flood zone or any of that, because that comes with the natural hazards disclosure itself, which is a mandatory map reading disclosure to determine seismic, flood, tsunami, fire, wildfire, all those sorts of zones. So it's a map reading service, and that's what we would provide.
Will the prospective buyers be able to look at that information?
That's the point.
That is the point.
That is the point. Full disclosure. Okay. And we'll have to get with our legal department to see what we need to disclose insofar as this is a public agency, what disclosures, because nobody has really done anything with this land. It's not been in, quote, private ownership since 1953. So it's just been sitting there, and so it's just a little jewel that needs to be marketed, and the person who wants to come and pay the price will negotiate. Okay. And I sit on the side for a negotiating table for the Harbor District. That's my job.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a couple other questions, but I don't have any more questions for you.
All right. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Thank you. Commissioner Brennan?
Okay, so I did want to mention that when the public made comment earlier, they were quite confused about this agenda item, and if we had public comment after the report was given on the agenda item, it would probably be a lot easier for the public to make public comment, because then they'd know what they were commenting on. They would have heard the report. So I'd just like to mention that again, that we are doing public comment in the wrong order. And I hope that we can reorder back to the way we used to do it soon. As far as my questions go with this, I know I read on the second page that, and it was mentioned earlier, that the district has been talking with the Coastside Fire Protection District regarding the property, and that there was there a committee of commissioners that was meeting with the fire district? I heard some mention of Commissioner Tucker and maybe Commissioner Paravano, or sorry, President Paravano meeting with was there a committee? Maybe the staff knows. Were there any meetings held with the commissioners and anybody with the fire district?
No, I think he was referring to the last time.
Should I answer that, Mr. President?
Please.
The last time.
Yes, there is an active committee. It's comprised of Commissioner Tucker and Commissioner Bernardo. That committee did meet once with representatives of the Coastside Fire District.
Point of
Commissioner
clarification.
Bernardo.
Point of clarification.
I'm sorry.
The original committee was President Paravano and myself.
Correct.
We met with them, not Commissioner Bernardo.
Yes, although at the point when we did that, actually it was Commissioner Bernardo, but he could not attend, and so Commissioner Paravano sat in as alternate.
Right, he did not, but point
Yes.
was not.
And so it was Paravano who was with you at that, yes.
And how many
So yes, there is a committee.
How many meetings has the committee had with the fire district?
One.
Okay, and when was that?
A while ago, I'd have to find out, I can't recall,
Like a couple months ago?
at least.
Oh, several months ago, like 6 months ago?
A few.
Okay. And was there a report produced from the meeting?
There was no written report to my memory. I think it was just reported that the meeting had occurred.
And there was no interest in just telling the board that?
Not at that time.
So we're just finding out about it tonight. The members that weren't part of the committee, that would be me and Commissioner Holsinger, unless he already knew about it. But this is the first time I've heard of this committee ever.
All commissioners have received a list of the committees, and that committee is on the list, so you have it.
I've not known of any committees having any active meetings in any recent times, so no, I did not know. We have a lot of committees, most of them don't ever meet. So that list is not adequate.
Mr. President, maybe I will jump in here now. From an agenda perspective, the item agendized is the approval of a contract, and it does seem to me that we are straying pretty far from what was publicly noticed as the agenda item.
Okay, so I'll just keep moving here. A realtor is quite experienced and will be excellent for our needs, but just so I understand the process a little bit better, you mentioned that normally this would go out to bid. Does that mean that it would go out for a certain number of realtors to give proposals, or how is this process different than what is typically done?
Please.
Yeah. Through the chair, Mr. President, I'll respond. Basically, the ordinance code provides for the Harbor District to retain professional consulting services for a variety of purposes. And the ordinance code includes a provision, which is 2.7.2.2, that provides that the Harbor Commission, if it so determines that it's in the Harbor District's best interest, to refrain from going through a request for proposals process, not bids, but proposals, then you can do so. It's being recommended here to do that in the interests of expediting the disposition of this property. You may recall that one of the items in the grand jury report referred to the fact that the Harbor District has a number of long-term assets that aren't producing revenue, I think the language was. And they were referring to this property as one of them. And so it is clearly in the district's interest in responding to the grand jury report to move with alacrity to try to dispose of this property and obtain some revenue from the sale of it. And that is why we're proposing to dispense with a request for proposal process, which will take a few months, as is typically the case. That's what's behind that.
Thank you for explaining that. That's all I have.
Okay. Call the question. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Ricardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Douglas?
Aye.
President Carvana?
Aye. The motion carries. The item number 5, discuss and direct general manager to broaden the scope of outreach regarding the sale of the district surplus land. Report from Commissioner Brennan.
This was an agenda item I requested, and I requested it specifically because the Harbor District had not hired a realtor regarding this property, and that it appeared that the district might be moving ahead with some sort of like behind-the-scenes deal with one agency specifically versus opening up an opportunity for various agencies or individuals to purchase the property, which would inevitably lead to the best price. So now that that situation has been rectified, fortunately, I don't think we really need to discuss this further unless anybody has anything else.
Okay, thank you. We have speaker slips from the public. Start with Mr. Dan Haggerty. There's a number 5.
Good evening, Honorable Chair and Commissioners. My name is Dan Haggerty from El Granada. I have a letter. You have a copy. I believe each of you have a copy. I'd like to read it for my time. It's addressed from Lenny Schultz to President Paravano and Harbor Commissioners. As a longtime resident of El Granada and former elected official, and most recently the co-chair of Granada Parks Committee, I have been active in many important community issues. I urge you to allow the community to determine the best and highest use of the Harbor District surplus land referred to as the post office lot. It is clear to me that it was intent of the widows of the farmers who deeded this land to the Harbor District in 1953 that the land be used for public enjoyment. Otherwise, they would have sold it for profit. It would be a big mistake and a big loss for the community if it is sold and used for anything other than community service district. My comments now. I've lived here 26 years in El Granada. Currently a member of the Mid-Coast Community Council, and I'm also on the Granada Parks Committee. I've seen a lot of change over the 26 years, and quite a few views have been blocked by development, and more developments have been proposed blocking more views. The people come here, the people that come here love the postcard views and the semi-rural feel of the Granada, the coast side. I don't think anybody denies that. Everybody knows that the views are important and the feel. I talked to a lot of community members, and many agree that this is an extremely important piece of property in El Granada. Since our community was gifted the post office lot by the widows of the past farmers' land, and since the community has been enjoying the open feel of this at this small downtown, one block downtown of El Granada, there are going to be thousands of community members that will be affected by any development on this lot. I respectfully request that the Commission grants the full opportunity and a best chance for the Granada Community Services District to acquire the community members and have the community members decide what is the best use for it. I respectfully would like to steer away from any bidding war and having the most wealthy person out there outbid the community of El Granada that the land was really intended for, even as far back as Daniel Birmingham. He wanted this property to be enjoyed by the community. It's very sensitive. There's a lot of important community issues attached to this property currently. The very limited and necessary important parking that the community is using for getting their mail at the post office, that's in jeopardy. The views of the community have been accustomed to, and there's been many that are already lost. So the views of that on that downtown strip are very important. The need of a town gathering area with benches and a community center. There could be a variety of community activities at this place. Public bathrooms, which
okay, let's the next speaker. Thank you, Mr. Haggerty.
And
the next speaker is Mr. Fran Pollard.
I believe that it could be an exceptional piece of property for everyone if it was planned properly.
Fran Pollard, El Granada, and I'm just going to read the letter I submitted. Goes along with Lenny Schultz. She was co-chair of Granada Parks. I was the other co-chair. And we were responsible for the campaign to get the Granada Sanitary District to become a community services district for park purposes. So my letter is, our committee held a special meeting this last weekend to discuss the Harbor District's proposal to sell the parcel adjoining the El Granada Post Office to the Coastside Fire Protection District. There was a consensus that we do not want this to take place. We feel betrayed once again by the Harbor District by going behind the backs of the community by not announcing your interest in selling this land and allowing us to participate in the discussion and offer. The same thing happened with the Burnham Strip property a couple of years ago and with the Quarry Park acreage 20 years ago. Secret negotiations were held without the community's knowledge to sell to private individuals, and then we had to deal with them and the realtors to get those properties for the community, which was always the intention of the original owners, as was just expressed in Lenny's letter. 20 years ago, we formed the very active and determined community organization of Mid-Coast Parklands in order to acquire and manage Quarry Park, which we did for 15 years until the county took it over a couple of years ago. We now have a great park for the coastside to enjoy. We also intend to discuss the sale of the El Granada Post Office parcel with the Granada Sanitary District, which is our only local government agency that was recently given the right to reorganize into a community services district in order to have park and recreation powers. We decided to urge the Granada Sanitary District to purchase the parcel because GSD needs the building for its permanent offices instead of wasting considerable money on rent. And the community needs a building that would cater to its social, political, and small business needs, such as a community center. And the post office parcel seems to be the perfect fit for both GSD and the community. It could also be designed in such a way as to protect the Half Moon Bay views, the water views we're talking about, we have all come to know and love, unlike the enormous new fire station that would block the view and the town from the town center. It's not that we don't want the fire station in El Granada. We're very grateful to have the fire department in the current station in El Granada. In fact, we also need to attend the next fire district meeting to ask them to consider remodeling the current building instead of wasting money buying a lot and building a new oversized building in El Granada for the same reasons as mentioned above. We hope you will reconsider your offer to sell until our community and the GSD can determine if this is the best thing for all. Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have Mr. Leonard Warren, item number 5.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. Leonard Warren, El Granada. Since state law requires that surplus land to be sold by any government agency first be offered to 3 types of agencies: parks agencies, school districts, and low-income housing providers. That is clearly the legislative intent that those 3 uses trump all other uses, or they wouldn't require all government agencies to give first right of refusal to those 3 agencies. Obviously, those uses are higher priority than a fire station, which can be built just about anywhere. Your new real estate agent is wrong about the zoning. The 12,000, just under 12,000 square feet on the corner next to the post office is zone C1, which is neighborhood commercial, which, by the way, does not allow fire station. The remaining 2 acres or so of the property is not zoned R3 multifamily residential. It is zoned EG, El Granada Gateway, which is a very special zoning. There's only 8 acres, well, maybe not. Maybe the whole Burnham Strip is EG. But there's very limited El Granada Gateway zoning, and it's very restrictive in what can be done there, with virtually nothing, nearly nothing allowed to be built. In fact, the only permanent buildings that I recall that you're allowed in the EG zoning are community center. So this district, the Harbor District, rushed through the surplus designation in April for the specific purpose of having the 60-day right of first refusal period run out prior to the Measure G vote, which received just about 60% of the vote, which on the coast side, anything more than 50% plus 1 is a substantial margin, and 60% is pretty rare. So there is significant community support for the Community Services District, and with a single exception, everybody that I've spoken with in El Granada supports what I've been suggesting happen with this land. So I urge you to offer this at this point to GSD, which in 5 weeks, 5.5 weeks will be a community services district with Parks Authority. And the best use for the community is for you to offer it, give that district right of first refusal. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Grinnell.
Yeah, Mr. President, just in the interest of accurate information, you have in your packet on this item preceding item 4. On the very last page, you'll notice Chapter 24 use permits, Section 6500B. This was provided to us through Supervisor Horsley's office, and basically it enables a public safety agency like the fire district, in fact, to put a new fire station on that property. I just want that out there for the record.
Okay. I would also like to add that what we're discussing is probably a more specific to item number 4, but one of the recommendations in the civil grand jury report, R8, is that the Harbor District will continue to seek interested parties to acquire non-revenue producing surplus properties. Okay, so now we've heard public comment and Commissioner Brennan has given a report. What is the wish of the commission?
I think it's a moot point.
It's a moot point. Moot point?
We don't need to do anything.
Okay. All right, that concludes the items on the agenda. Item 6, I have a speaker request for item 6 from Mr. John Ullum.
Okay. I have been looking backwards through all of your, at your website, looking for this, any special committee meeting, any that's been noticed. Only one has been noticed, and that was one that Mr. Bernardo and Ms. Brennan participated in, and as far as I can tell, most of you were not happy about that committee meeting. And that's coming from the review's story about it. Now, what's interesting here is this committee meeting you're talking about that you had for discussing the sale of the fire district, of this surplus land. And Commissioner Brennan asked a bunch about like when did it happen. Mr. Grinnell can't really say. And I'm looking through your website and I can't find it. Can't find a single committee meeting ever that is documented on your website, except for that one. So, this is a question for you. I'm looking at the laws and Brown Act as it applies to special committees, and whether the special committees have to follow the rules in the Brown Act. And they talk a little bit about special committees and even standing committees that infrequently or sporadically meet are subject to the Brown Act if they consist of more than a quorum, which I know is kind of a slippery number, what a quorum is. But what I think is relevant here, or if they have ongoing authority to address issues within the subject matter jurisdiction of the parent body. So you appear to have had a meeting where, was it at least 2 of you, I imagine, maybe it's 3, I'm not sure, maybe you can tell me who's on this committee and how that committee was formed, because I'll be asking Ms. Harris to document all of this, and you know I will. And so I expect to see the agendas, I expect to see the budget packets, I expect to see who's on that committee. Also, I have asked you in the past for anything related to special committees, budget packets, things like, or not budget, board packets, that's the right word I'm looking for. And at that time, you gave me nothing. There was no...
He's going back to...
there's no documentation that you had available. So I see you guys are in conference. So why don't you, could you address the board just, for our own, maybe I don't even need to ask this, maybe the board was, whoever that committee was totally within its rights to have a unnoticed, unagendized, nobody knew about it, not even some of the commissioners meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner statements and requests.
Are we on A or B? Because we didn't get to do A, did we?
Let's do A. Committee reports.
I'd like to ask for a committee report from this committee I don't even know the name of that met with the Coastside Fire Protection District. If we could please get a report on that.
Mr. President, if memory serves me correct, we made an oral report, but it's some months ago, and I'm not clear exactly on the meeting, so I would not be able to do another oral report. I do know that I think after our report, I was approached by Mr. Leonard Warren to tell me that they didn't have the votes to buy the property from us or something like that. So that refreshes my memory. That's about as far as I could go.
So you're saying that you gave, during this committee report segment of our agenda, you gave a report to the board on this. What's the committee's name again?
I have no idea. What's the committee's name, Mr. Grinnell?
Yes. It is the New Office Building and Post Office Lot Committee.
Oh, boy, that's a long name. Let me write that down.
Oh,
New Office Building and what? Post Office Lot?
It's called New Administration Office, Post Office Lot.
New Admin Office slash Post Office Lot.
Can she spell the words?
Lot Committee. Okay. Okay, so maybe the staff could send me information about what date that committee report was given so that I can go back and watch the video, and that way I don't have to ask for a recap. Can I get that from the staff, please, through the president?
If that is a request.
Okay, great. That's all I have for committees.
Okay, Commissioner statements and requests. The Board of Harbor Commissioners may make public statements limited to 5 minutes. Commissioner Brennan.
Well, this is the time when commissioners can ask for agenda items for a future agenda.
That's the next one.
Oh, it is, okay. All right, we'll get to that when we get to that. So as far as my public statement goes, I have a lot of concerns about some of the potential Brown Act violations that have been going on with this board recently and in the past. And an example of that would be we, for this meeting, received a revised agenda less than 72 hours from when the agenda should have been posted. And it may have been a minor correction, I don't really know, because when we got the revised agenda, it didn't have any indication of exactly what was changed, so I really am not sure what was changed in it, but it's clearly listed as Second Amendment. And that came in on August 18th at 9:31 a.m., which is not giving the required 72 hours for posting agendas. So I would hope that we could refrain from doing that going forward. And then also, the district's response to the grand jury report which came in as an edited draft from the auditor today at 2:35. I just find that completely unacceptable. We cannot be getting reports, or in this case, it was a response to the grand jury report, which is very, very critical and important for this district. To receive that at 2:35 today is just completely unacceptable. So I don't know what went wrong there, but I would hope that that would never happen again. And then this issue with committees not giving reports and commissioners not being aware of the existence of committees and not being aware that committee meetings were even held with other districts, I also find very unacceptable, and I hope that we can correct that going forward. Thank you.
Commissioner Bernardo.
I would just like to briefly thank President Paravano and staff once again for the tremendous effort that you put in tonight in keeping us on track and keeping us in order of our response to the civil grand jury report. I know that it's very complex and it was very challenging, and I just want to thank you for your leadership on that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Tucker?
Mr. President, I applauded you vigorously while we were having the hearings on the response to the grand jury report. I echo my colleagues' sentiments exactly. I think the way you organized it, the way you laid it out, the way you performed it was spectacular, really. I'm so appreciative of what you did. Like I said earlier, this is probably the most transparent, the most articulate report that we've dealt with in a long, long time, and you handled it very well, and I applaud you, and I say thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Commissioner Holzinger.
I would simply like to echo my colleagues' comments and thank you for shepherding us through this evening.
Well, I certainly appreciate the support, and it certainly has been a challenging and complicated process, but with support, one feels a lot more comfortable in going forward in areas that are uncertain, but it makes the situation a lot more easier to comply with the response of the grand jury report when I sense that there's teamwork involved. And I really appreciate the commissioner's input, the commissioner's responses, the staff's responses, and organization. There was very well-organized documents that were received, and they were very readable and easy for the public to understand. So I'm glad that this is over with. Now it's up to us to carry out these recommendations and to carry out, in the public's eye, a much better way of being open and transparent and being able to own this civil grand jury report that was issued on July the 9th, 2014. And I think with the passage of the motion that we adopted tonight, the residents and our residents of San Mateo County and our constituents at San Mateo Harbor District will feel a lot better, a lot more comfortable as we move forward. Okay, for the second part of item number 6 is sending future agenda items. And this time I'll start with my left. Commissioner Holzinger.
No request, thank you.
Commissioner Tucker.
I have none.
Commissioner Bernardo.
I have none.
Commissioner Brennan.
Two things. I'd like to ask that there be a list included in the board packet going forward that if we aren't going to get to agenda items that were requested by the board, and they're not on the agenda, but they've been previously approved by the board to be included in the agenda, if there could be a list included in the board packet so that we know what those are. So we have a running list of agenda items that the board has approved but haven't yet been placed on an agenda. It just seems like there have been a number of those recently, and I understand that they can't always make it onto every agenda because we have a lot of stuff we have to cover. But there's got to be a better way to track it, because right now we don't have any way to track that at all. And it would be helpful if there could just be an attachment in the board packet that just kept us on top of where we're at with that.
Point of information, if I may, to assist Commissioner Brennan on this. Basically, the board has acted on requests to place items on a future agenda in two ways. One, the motion has included a specific meeting, such as place it on the next meeting. That has always been done. Other ones have been approved to place it on a future agenda, which leaves it totally up in the air as to when that might be. Frankly, I would suggest that that not be done, because given the pressure of work, staff is inclined to deal with first things first, and future agendas are in the future. So we can provide you with a list of outstanding items that have not been placed on an agenda. I think there's maybe only a couple of them, but we will do that.
Point of order?
Please.
This is to make a motion to put an item.
Yeah, we have to.
Did I hear a motion or it hasn't been seconded?
Right, we have to hear a motion. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so that comment from the general manager, I'm not sure I totally followed. It sounded very circular, and all I'm suggesting is that included in our board packet, there be, or on the agenda, wherever it makes sense, there just be a list of items that are to be placed on a future agenda. And I'm not asking for a date by which they will be on a future agenda, just add them to the list so that we can see how many we've got, so that we can remember what we all agreed to place on a future agenda. It's just a tracking thing. Like, there's got to be a way for us to know. Okay?
No problem.
So do I need to make a motion to have that be part of the board packet, or are we all good with that? Okay.
These are items that...
I can just provide that. I don't think you need to move it unless you find a need.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be helpful. I think it'd be helpful for everybody, including the staff. We'd know what was coming. I think that one of the things that was mentioned in the grand jury report was that this board needs to start having real committee meetings. And a good place to start would be with the Finance Committee, which we actually have a policy that the board approved at some point that requires that we have a Finance Committee. And I've been pushing for a Finance Committee for the last, year and a half. And I think it's time that we have an active Finance Committee. So I'm not suggesting who should be on it. I'm just saying that we need to do it. And it is one of our policies. How can we move that forward? Do I need to ask to have a future agenda item on setting up a Finance Committee?
I think we have a Finance Committee, don't we?
There's no Finance Committee that meets.
Do you have any of our report that gives us all the committee assignments?
Just because we have a committee assignment does not mean that there's an active committee. There's a huge difference there. Just having a list of committees is not the same as having a committee that actually meets occasionally. I know in the past, the Harbor District thinks just having a list of committees is the same thing as actually having committees, but it's really not. A committee has to have a meeting. And if the committee never meets, it's not really an active committee.
Active is the word, okay.
Yes, active.
Active. It would be a committee, only it wouldn't be an active committee.
The grand jury meant an active committee, not just the idea or conceptual, list of committees, but real meeting active committees. I know we've had this conversation a lot, but so should I make a motion then? Do we need to actually have a motion to have an agenda item to discuss setting up a Finance Committee that is active?
I don't see any word active in their recommendation.
Point of order, please. For council. As I understand Commissioner Brennan's suggestion, she wants to simply discuss the idea generally. And it seems to me isn't that part of what the commissioner comments is for, is to give the commissioner to whom it's important an opportunity to discuss it?
In my brief time here, it seems to me that the commissioner comment period has been used less for discussion than for making a statement. If you wish to agendize a discussion of how to establish committees and with what frequency they should meet, that would probably be something that might be of interest enough to the public that should be agendized as a actual item for discussion rather than an unannounced discussion such as you're beginning to have now, and I'm starting to get a little uneasy.
Thank you.
Is there a
So
motion?
the answer to your question, Commissioner Brennan, would be, it seems to me perfectly appropriate to seek to place on an agenda an item involved. I won't presume to tell you what you want it to be, but something along the lines of what you're asking for.
Oh, yeah, so I move that we have an item on a future agenda to discuss having an active finance committee.
The motion fails here, no second. Any other requests?
That's all, thank you.
Okay. No. Okay, I have one. We are a member of the California Harbor Masters and Port Captains organization in California. And at the end of September, they are going to be having an award ceremony. And I understand that through the action of our harbor master and many of the deputy patrolmen, that there could be many of them that could be up for awards. So I would like to put on the agenda an item that will support the identification of patrolmen and harbor master that can be forwarded to the harbor masters and port captains as Executive Director Tom Welch. So that way we can get duly recognition of our deputy patrolman and our harbor master.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, and under discussion and comments, there is a timely aspect to this, and the nominations have to be in by September 3rd. So that's the date of our next meeting. So I'm hoping that Harbor Master Grindy is able to quickly turn around any recommendations that we would have after our meeting on September 3rd to Mr. Welch. So that way they can give duly consideration to our harbor master and the deputy patrolman.
Yes.
Okay, so any other further comments or discussion? Please.
No, not about that motion.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Bernardo?
Aye.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
President Carvalho?
Aye. Thank you. Okay.
Could I just interrupt for 1 second? I forgot to ask my most important request for a future agenda item, and it's very, very quick. Could I ask it in 30 seconds? Okay. I move that we have, that we place on a future agenda an item to discuss our membership as a district in the California Maritime Infrastructure Bank Authority. So it would be a discussion about our membership status with the Bank Authority.
I'm sorry, a discussion.
Whether or not we should be members of the Maritime Bank Authority, Infrastructure Bank Authority. So to discuss our membership. We're currently members of the Maritime Infrastructure Bank Authority per a 2000 agreement. And so it seems long overdue to have a discussion about it. Could you ask for a second?
Commissioners are aware that I'm making a second. I hear no second, so the motion fails.
Move to adjourn.
A second for adjournment? Okay, we have a motion and a second for adjournment, and we will be convening on September 3rd at Seacrest School. Thank you all for your attendance.